Okay, cool, we're back. So what do we do? We talked about big picture, right? We're going to install some things, which we already did also. So we just installed Java and Android Studio. We have not yet fired up Android Studio, which that's what we're about to do. But this is all in the service of getting our development environment set up and also checking out a simple Hello World application so that we can understand a little bit about how can we interact with our applications when we're debugging them. And we're going to do that via the virtual device, the Android virtual device. But also, like, what does an application look like? I mean, when we open it in Android Studio, what actually are we looking at? What is the anatomy of sort of the collection of files that make up an Android application? So let's dive in. I got this frog in my throat. I'm sorry. It's winter time. I got a little cold. I've been biking outdoors without the proper attire. Bear with me, though. Okay, so let's fire up Android Studio. Click on this tiny, tiny little icon down here at the bottom. You'll note that it's powered by the IntelliJ platform. What is that? Some of you who have been writing Java code for a while, you may be familiar with Eclipse, which is an alternative IDE that you can also use to develop Android applications. Or you might also be familiar with IntelliJ. And Android Studio is basically an appropriation of IntelliJ taken over by Google and the Android team, specifically to evolve it to be an IDE that is customized for Android development. So that's pretty cool. This version of IntelliJ essentially has Google and the Android teams as its shepherd and sort of developer. So that's great. So when you open Android Studio, you see a window like this. I'm going to click, if this is your first time, I'm going to click Agree because I want to help improve Android Studio. It's a very vague thing to agree to, but hopefully it means good things. Because there is room for improvement, believe it or not. So welcome to Android Studio. You're going to see a list of your recent projects on the left-hand side here. And as you can see, I've got a couple little boilerplate things just as I was sort of running through the motions, preparing to record this video. But you'll also see, more importantly, a nice set of options on the right about getting started, alternative to recent projects. And what I want to do right now is click on Start a New Android Project. You can also, of course, open. You can import one from elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to click on Start a New Android Project, and it's going to walk us through basically choosing some initial values and configurations for this new project that we're about to bring to life. So I might call this application Hello World, just because it seems like a nice introduction here. Company domain, let's say, just to stay true to my roots, I'm going to say onemonth.com. And I can choose a project location. I'm gonna roll with the default that they've set up here for me, and I'm going to click Next. It will now ask you sort of what kind of application do you want to develop. Do you want to develop an Android Wear app, an Android TV application, an auto application, Glass? We're going to stick with phone and tablet. Obviously, it's the most prevalent and the one that we want to dive into first. It's going to ask you which version of the operating system, which version of the Android SDK do you want to develop for. We can kind of roll with the default, which they're saying is 15. It will conveniently tell you approximately what percentage of the devices that are active on the Play Store this will run on. So you'll notice if we choose the furthest back here, actually, if we go all the way back, I'm assuming we get to 100%. The default that they give you is 15, which is 96%. And if you roll all the way up to 6.0, Android M, aka Marshmallow, you'll see your app will run on less than 1% of the devices. That's cool if you want that new. But we're gonna roll with Android API 15, Android 4.0.3, aka Ice Cream Sandwich. I dig the names, but I wish that there were not 3 different pieces of information that identify a single API version. It gets a little frustrating sometimes. But long story short, we're gonna let Android Studio roll with the default and stick with API 15 and hit Next. I'm having to scrunch down because my hair is all cut off. I tried to adjust this camera, but it didn't work. Hopefully that's all right. So what's happening right here? So the next step, now that we've named our project, chosen a location, and said we want this to be a phone and tablet project, targeting this specific API level, we have basically a couple of boilerplate project template options available to us here. This is pretty common for an IDE, allowing you to develop mobile applications or other pieces of software for other platforms. We are just going to choose, for the sake of this, this kind of setup exercise, the blank activity. And you may say, what does that mean? Just know that the word activity has special meaning in the Android world. It's not speaking about sort of like movement. It is talking about an activity is a name for a mechanism that encapsulates a portion of the user interface on your device. It could be sort of a full screen section of user interface. We can also get into fragments. So activities and fragments, they're two words that you'll hear all the time, you'll read about. Those are basically the building blocks for any user interface that you want to build for the Android operating system. We're going to choose a blank activity because it will just give us sort of like a blank canvas to start on, which includes, as you can see here, a nice fab floating action button that we can chain onto and trigger certain interactions from, as well as a nice options menu up here that we could populate. You tap this button, you'll see a little menu of items. We could populate that with different things related to our application. You can look through here and see a bunch of other things, right? Google Maps, etc. Right now, we're going to choose blank activity, and we're going to hit next. It's going to ask you, do you want to change the name of this activity? Just hit finish. We're going to roll with the names recommended to us. Cool. So the project will load and eventually open in front of us. Need some Jeopardy music here. Is that what it is? Jeopardy? Yeah. Cool. I'm going to check the time. I don't want to run too long. 7 minutes. We're doing good. Okay. Sometimes it takes a little while to start up. Apparently, it takes a little while to start up for an intro small-scale project that only has one activity in it. Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Cool. We're cruising, I guess. There we go. Okay. Try not to fill the awkward silence. Try not to let the silence be awkward, that moment there. Okay. So when Android Studio opens, you know what? Let me reevaluate that. We made a new project. Let's cut it there. Next video, we're going to talk about what is this new project? How do we navigate around? So for the sake of this video, we opened up Android Studio and we got to know the process of just creating a new project and a couple of things involved there. In between now and next time, maybe take a minute to explore this interface. It gets crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're going to talk about a subset of it that allows us to jumpstart things and get our first application off the ground. Cool. See you in a minute.